Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfelt from Flip Schools. Welcome to the Understanding Instruction series. This short video is for central office administrators, and it will just provide a brief explanation as to how to use mission to understand instruction. Of course, as central office administrators, mission should be and probably is very important to the work that you do. And one thing about mission that sometimes gets lost is that mission is actually very, very easy to work with, even though sometimes it may seem very removed from the work that you do and even somewhat abstract. And that is that if you can begin to think about mission as a way for you to understand how to add value to the intentions, planning, decision-making, and actions that you take, it can be very, very powerful. So in this sense, we will define mission as an organizational purpose. It's usually a stated purpose that from the standpoint of administrating and leading and managing a school district, it helps you to frame up and to understand what's valuable and what's not. So basically what happens is your mission statement becomes what some refer to as true north. It really becomes the guide by which you try to make decisions. So if you examine your mission statement and keep it in mind as you're beginning to contemplate and plan and make decisions and take actions, each time you do that, you can reflect and ask yourself, was this really value added to mission? And if you find that a lot of times, there's a mismatch between what's even being thought of or done and what your mission statement says, then either there's a problem with the mission or there's a problem with the thinking and the doing. And so it's really valuable to be able to do this, and it's just a very quick, easy way to keep in mind what's happening. Also, this question is very important in relation to the flip schools and flip classroom movement, because it's easy to think as a central administrator, well, if we just flip everything like other districts or other schools are doing, then we'll have an automatic solution. And that really is not the right way to enter into managing what flipping can do. If you do it from the standpoint of what is mission and then deciding if flipping creates a value add to mission or not, it'll be very helpful to you. So here we have two sample mission statements, and maybe your district has something like this. But you might say, well, the mission of our district is to help all students to become lifelong learners. Maybe that's what your mission statement says or something like it. Or maybe you have a mission statement like this second example. The mission of our district is to help all students to develop skills for the 21st century. So those missions, even though they're related, they're actually very different. And if you use mission to help you to understand instruction, then this can be just a really, really powerful tool for you as an instructional leader. So what we would say here is, if mission helps you to understand instruction, how does it do that? Well, Wiggins and McTighe provide us with a great framework with their understanding by design work that they do, and basically they take us through three key questions. The first one is to start at the end and to say, what are the deliverables of instruction? What do they look like? What's the product here we're trying to get to? And then the next thing that they ask is, well, if we're trying to get to a certain product, how do we assess that product? And then also they encourage us to take a look at the actual instructional practice and what does that look like. So if you can kind of tie together deliverables, assessment, and instructional practice into a system and then lay those down against mission, you can begin to really get a good understanding of what's happening. So for instance, if you're looking at a mission statement about lifelong learning, you have to start to begin to think, well, if our mission says that we're fostering lifelong learning in our students, then we have to be able to answer the question, What are the deliverables of instruction that produce lifelong learning? What happens as a result of teaching lifelong learning to students? What does it look like? Well, lifelong learners really are able to direct themselves in terms of learning. They understand that it's important to reflect. They know how to create plans. They understand how, what the power of education is and the power of learning in their lives. And they're able to express that through things that they do. Now, if you see that that's not actually being fostered in your district, even though that might be what your mission says, then you can begin to use that as a point of improvement. Again, a flipped technology can help with that. I mean, flipping does provide lots of opportunities for student choice, self-directedness, many of the kinds of deliverables that we would look for in lifelong learning. But again, it has to be a value add to mission before it makes sense. And then we'd look at, how do we assess that? Well, if we want students to be self-directed in their learning, do we assess that in any way? How do we assess that? Do we recognize it? Do we measure it? Do we ever talk about it? Do we qualitatively or quantitatively assess lifelong learning development in our students? If we don't, then there's really a big disconnect with instruction and mission. And then what would instruction look like that fosters lifelong learning? So again, whether we use a flipped technology or traditional approaches in our classroom, we're beginning to ask the questions about deliverables, assessment, and instructional practice, and examining whether or not that's a value add to what our mission statement says. So again, the second example of a mission statement, and maybe some of you have one like this in your own districts, but the mission of our district is to help all students to develop skills for the 21st century. I mean, that sounds really flowery, and it will just be a flowery statement that hangs out there and doesn't really mean anything unless someone does take instructional leadership and begins to pose questions against mission as to whether or not decisions and planning and actions that are taking are value added against that mission. And so again, you can take a look within the flipped technologies and say, well, if we use flipping in our school district here, what deliverables of instruction will that produce that actually are value added to developing skills for the 21st century? So, you can begin to talk about that and look at that and examine that. And if it's value added, then it all makes sense, to flip and to develop the skills, and that's all value added for mission. If there's a disconnection there, then it doesn't necessarily mean that you throw everything out, but it's certainly a point of improvement that needs to be driven in instruction. Again, how are we assessing the skills for the 21st century? What are those skills? Teamwork, communication, critical thinking, systems thinking, aesthetic responsiveness, whatever those skills are we just talking about them in mission? Are we actually looking for them to be demonstrated as deliverables in our students? Are we assessing that? And are we designing instruction that actually foster those skills? So these three simple questions about deliverables, assessment, and instructional practice are great little questions. They're not really little, they're little, but they're powerful, that you can carry around with you. And again, lay that down against the value add to mission, and it'll help you to understand whether or not you're on point. And again, if we start to apply blended technologies and flip technologies in our district, you want to make sure that that makes sense against mission. So hopefully this brief talk here has just reminded you as a central office administrator how you can use mission to help understand instruction better. If you'd like more information, we do have a Flip Institute website. You can find that at theflipinstitute.com. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for listening.